What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you'll never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday and the coming weekend here. So the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sam is sitting in the control room today, filling in for Mike. And let's just get right on into it, to the Kavanaugh Carnival, if you will. And by the way, yes, we did get our test alert for the nationwide presidential alert system to warn us of incoming ballistic missiles or war or pandemic, or just to give Donald Trump another way to get information to us without having to go through the corporate media. So that was all done with. Looking at what's going on, though, over at the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the Democrats are still fighting tooth and nail. And they're still trying to find some way to stop this from moving forward. But this whole case against Kavanaugh is collapsing. This sexual assault, all these allegations, and they keep coming up with new ones, all of them anonymous, all of them non-verifiable. And but it is falling apart. It is falling apart. If you go on out and you look at comments on social media, people absolutely, they're fed up with this. We've had enough of this nonsense. And we know it is nonsense. And we know that, getting somebody to hurl an allegation about, half a century ago, this person touched me inappropriately and I can't prove it, but just take my word for it. It's ridiculous. People are just sick and tired of it. So it is, falling apart, which is why the New York Times is over there regurgitating an old story about Trump's taxes, and the Democrats are trying to bring up the fact, well, my goodness, he drinks. We got to, he's got a drinking problem. We should block him on that. And they haven't quite gotten down to the overdue library books, but I think sooner or later they're going to get there. What has really pulled the rug out from all of this is that Christine Blasey Ford's testimony against Kavanaugh has completely unraveled because a former boyfriend submitted a sworn statement basically refuting her key claims. And Grassley is out there saying that, this has to be dealt with. He's in contact with Ford's lawyers saying, what's going on here? So this longtime boyfriend came on out, and what he said was that, let's see, I'm looking for the name of the boyfriend. It was originally withheld. It's been released, though. But basically, this is what was in the letter that, Brian Merrick, that's his name. He said, in all the time that they were together, they were a couple for a while, Ford never mentioned any sexual assault. She never mentioned Kavanaugh. Ford is not, in fact, scared of confined spaces. She's not scared of flying. She's a jet setter. And here's the intriguing part. Ford knew how to beat a polygraph, and that gets a little stickier a bit further on. But apparently the reason they broke up the relationship is that Ford was cheating on him. And then after they had separated, continued to use his credit cards, which basically amounted to fraud. Remember when this whole thing first came on up about how Christine Ford, she passed the polygraph test, and I said, polygraphs are not accurate. They're very subjective. They're not admissible as evidence in a court of law. And don't forget, Ted Bundy passed his polygraph. And now here's where it gets really interesting, because apparently, according to the boyfriend, Christine Ford was coaching her friend, this Monica, who was getting ready for a job with the FBI, Monica McLean, on how to pass a polygraph. Now, she testified. Ford testified under oath. She's never given tips on someone how to beat a polygraph. So we now know Ford has lied under oath. All right, let's take a phone call. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeehaw, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
Well, you know the thing is about this emergency alert system? You know, Mike, I remember before this digital TV stuff came out, you know, pretty much you had the emergency broadcast system, but, you know, it's more like laid dormant, and pretty much the TV networks took care of everything. I mean, there was an Amber Alert, they would split the screen on the TV and, you know, and allow the program to go on. Ever since they did the digital TV, it's like the emergency broadcast system comes on. It makes the big loud noise, interrupts your programming. I mean, very unnecessary with the scroll on the bottom of the screen with a message, and, you know, and now we got this emergency alert system, and I just think this is going to turn the president into a cult of personality. You know,
there was actually a lawsuit filed against this test and against the system itself in New York by people who are saying they're concerned that this is just going to be used for propaganda, that this system will be used to try and spook us all into, you know, going a direction without taking the time to think about it. And the timing of this system being set up and tested relative to our concerns about a coming false flag may not be coincidental.
Exactly. And, well, I've been hearing like a lot of rumors that mass arrest to 50,000, you know, all that stuff, and, you know, and military tribunals. And, you know, I've been sort of like arguing against tribunals because you want to know why? They lack due process, especially if you're going to try civilians. I don't care if they're traitors or not. You know, they still are entitled to due process. I don't care what courtroom they're into.
I agree with you. And if you look at the history of the Nuremberg trials, I mean, there were forced confessions, and basically they were saying, we're going to get you for World War II. We're going to make it look like it's all legal and official, but it isn't. You know, just get used to the fact that we're going to be hanging most of you.
Because I know in the Kavanaugh hearings, they had one of the questions was, you know, civilians collaborating with the foreign power, they don't fall under civilian law, they fall under military. And, you know, that's so like highly questionable because, you know, in a military tribunal, you can't bring your own witnesses on your behalf. And I don't really think you could hire a civilian lawyer to give you a vigorous defense. To bring, you know, what I mean?
You know, I've been hearing this story about how there are all these unsealed indictments and there are going to be mass arrests and there's going to be this and that. I think it's fake news. I think it's a rumor that was started to get us all to sit on our rear ends and say, okay, help is coming. We don't need to do anything today. And I kind of reject that. Anything else, George?
Well, you know, another good thing I kind of noticed, the Republican Party in Texas is starting to, starting to get the message, because now they're offering, they want poll watchers, and they're running classes. This is all the Republican Party county, Harris County, I think Brazoria County, and a bunch of others, classes on preserving election integrity.
Good.
I mean, they want to go out and follow buses now.
I'm glad somebody's doing something about that problem because, I mean, the Democrats are in a panic right now, and if they can't win the Congress, they are certainly going to try and steal it.
If they can't win fair, cheat.
Yes.
That's their motto. Well, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network, and we're going to go to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, the problem with Texas also, some of those counties are passing those school laws in school where you can't criticize Israel. So, you know, Texas is like wishy-washy to me on certain things, you know, like South Carolina, you know, unfortunately, you know. But, Mike, yeah, you're right. This whole tribunal thing, it's just like Hillary, let's lock her up. You know, it's nonsense. It's not going to happen. There's no tribunals coming, people. Nothing's coming.
You know, we just have the world war is going to get worse and worse. And I'm still convinced the United States ultimately is going to lose it.
Mike, I got to talk about this Dave Hodges and Steve Quayle. These guys are like way out there. I remember they keep, it's like, Hodges that was the Common Sense show. Remember, there was Russian Spetsnaz over here going to knock out our power grid, and then it was they're going to now it's Steve Quayle and Dave Hodges. There's going to be a civil war right before the nuclear strike. I mean, these guys are just taking two different things and making them one thing. You know, like, I mean, I don't trust those two at all because they're flaky. But
well,
like,
I think they're trying to sensationalize.
I
think they're trying to sensationalize their presentation in the hope that it's going to build their audience. And yeah, it can work. That's why the tabloids are so successful, as opposed to media that is just trying to report the news, you know, without embellishment.
I'm not saying there won't be a civil war because, you know, we have our history, and I won't say there won't ever be a nuclear war because you look at what's going on now. But yeah, they sensationalize this stuff, Mike, and it's sad how they use something like that just to get like ratings or this or that. I mean, I'm still waiting for the Spetsnaz to set off an EMP over here.
Yeah.
What a joke, man. People bought it. You know, people believe in this. You know, but Mike, I got to switch gears if I have time. I want to talk about Russia issued a warning to Israel about their electronic warfare is alert on their electronic warfare is set up.
Yes.
So the warning to not trust them. You know, they're nice enough to say don't. You know, they're giving them the warning. You know, and then Mike, real quick, I want to talk about Iran. How we're pulling out of the 55 treaty. Now, I'm not up to what the 55 treaty was, what that was per se.
Well, it was just a treaty of friendship, and it was struck, you know, when the Shah of Iran was in power. And the reason the U.S. has now canceled that treaty is that the United Nations High Court ruled in favor of Iran that there cannot be sanctions on humanitarian supplies going into the country. And so Pompeo threw a tantrum and pulled out of the treaty, or Trump threw a tantrum and pulled out of the treaty.
Yeah, like I go back to keep saying about Trump. Nope, don't like him no more. Thanks, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the news here for the Kavanaugh Carnival, as it were. One of the things that's really puzzling is Christine Ford. I think this whole thing got away from her. I think her idea was she was going to send in this letter to Dianne Feinstein, ask for anonymity, and tell her story to try and damage Kavanaugh, and that would be the end of it. And it got out of her control. And all of a sudden, she's being challenged on this thing, and she started naming friends from school as her witnesses. None of whom have corroborated any of the things that she's claimed. And one of the friends that were named, Leyland Kaiser, was completely blindsided. Ford didn't even give her a heads up. This was going to be coming down, the pike there. And she was interviewed in Daily Mail TV and said this woman was just absolutely left reeling when all of a sudden she wakes up one morning and her name is everywhere, all over the media, and apparently it was a bit of a shock, and I can imagine it would be a bit of a shock here. All right, let's take another phone call. Joe in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. This whole Kavanaugh thing, I know people think it's like another Sandra Levy or whatever, but I think it's actually one of the best red-pilling stories that I've seen in a while, and that's why I'm enjoying it. I think that the Republicans, if they were smart, would delay it another week or another 2 weeks, because in the next 2 weeks, her story, the more you analyze it, is going to fall apart more and more and more, and it's going to discredit all her defenders and all the Democrats. It's going to validate the president. It's also going to continue to alienate the people that the Democrats stupidly continue to alienate even after what they learned with Trump.
Yep.
The white, Catholic, middle class, Reagan Democrats. I mean, they are really gaining absolutely nothing from this at all politically. They already have the radical feminist vote.
Yeah.
That's not going to improve with, I mean, that's already locked. They are even alienating black people, if you ask me. The black males, black men, I should say, are probably, I guarantee you they see the witch hunt in this. They don't like this any more than white males.
No, they don't. The Democrats have alienated all men. With this, we presume you're guilty of sexual assault, and our accusation is all the proof that we need. But I disagree with delaying this. I think this needs to get wrapped up and put away because, first of all, it's making us look really bad to the rest of the world. Second of all, we're 5 weeks away from the midterm elections. And I'm sure that members of the Senate, need to be working on their campaigns and not get distracted by this stuff anymore. But this has been a complete and abject failure, and I can understand the panic for the Democrats, not just the fact that Kavanaugh is likely to be confirmed now, but the fact that just 5 weeks away from the midterm, their public image is not looking very good at all. And you're absolutely right. All men of any color are going to be looking at this revival of the 1990s male bash feminism with a great deal of distaste. Anybody who's old enough to remember what was going on back then realizes how bad men were being treated. And who wants to vote for a party that's pushing that agenda again?
Well, also, I would guarantee that 90% of the women that voted for Trump aren't going along with this radical feminist witch hunt. So in that regard, if they thought that they were going to get Trump voting women to go along with this charade, I think they're a lot smarter than the average brainwashed lefty that comes out of the colleges these days. It's really a shame, though. I mean, I'm a union guy, and it's a shame to see the Democratic Party being hijacked by these radical leftists.
Yes.
My buddy, union official, and years ago they started coming in there and telling him about gay rights and abortion rights. And he says, well, I just want to get better wages for my guys. And they're like, oh, no, we want you to stress this. And these radical crazies have destroyed or are in the process. You're witnessing the destruction of a great party, and it's sad. It's really sad to see.
Well, they did it to themselves. That's all I can say. And but I would like to see this over and done with this week because we've got other things that we all need to be looking at, like Syria and Iran and Russia, all these war zones, which corporate media is just not covering right now. And I'm very, very concerned that they're going to try and basically surprise us with a new war. And it may happen right after the midterm elections. So anyway, thank you for the call, Joe. We're going to let you go and get on back to the news because I got a lot of stuff to get through here. Okay, so we're talking about the performance of these accusers of Kavanaugh, and apparently Swetnick was giving an interview on NBC Monday night where she walked back. She backpedaled from what was in her sworn statement and basically came back and said that she saw Kavanaugh near the punch, but didn't actually see him or Mark Judge pour anything in there. And at one point, she called him Mark Kavanaugh. So, I mean, she doesn't even have his name straight here. Alan Dershowitz is out there saying if Julie Swetnick lied, she should be tried for perjury and sent to prison. Ditto the same thing for Christine Ford. And don't worry, Christine, we'll make sure that your jail cell has 2 front doors on it, so you'll feel comfortable. Now, Donald Trump basically came on out and reminded everybody of how the Democrats tried this with him back in 2016, that women were being approached and being offered rather substantial sums of money to come forward and say, Trump did this, Trump did that, and it was horrible, my life was ruined. Apparently, one of the women who was solicited to do this went public. She turned down $750,000 and said, no, my honor and integrity has a much, much higher price tag than that. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We're going to be right back with more about this whole Kavanaugh circus after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And yes, once again, we are standing here with our hands outstretched saying, please help us. Help us pay our bills. Help us replace worn-out equipment. Help us buy, some kibble for our control room technicians. And the address to donate, if you wish to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can call on in to make a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1. And don't forget that Front Sight Firearms Academy training promotion is back on from now through the end of the year, and it's a really, really good deal. If I lived in the western part of the U.S., I'd go for it myself. And of course, if you want to donate to whatreallyhappened.com, you can do that on the front page of my website. And it's all needed and it's all welcome. And if you look at the vast sums of money that are being spent by people like George Soros to lie to you, you understand how little it is we're asking from you to tell you the truth. So you might want to keep that in mind. Alrighty, so getting on back to the news here. Contrary to earlier expectations, the FBI is wrapping up their new, latest, greatest, number 7 investigation into Kavanaugh today. And apparently the report is going to be delivered to Capitol Hill very shortly. And here is where the story gets interesting, because no less a person than Dianne Feinstein has called for the results of this investigation to be kept under seal. So we are hearing that the report is going to be put in a safe, and the senators will be able to look at it in a secure environment. Translation, the FBI didn't find anything, or they even found something even more damaging to the accusers. And Feinstein doesn't want it out there. So it really has turned into a circus. Now, do you remember not too long ago, there was this situation where Jeff Flake had been accosted in an elevator by these two women claiming they were victims of sexual abuse, and how could he vote for Brett Kavanaugh? And they got Flake to back off and say that he wasn't going to vote for Kavanaugh unless there was this last final FBI investigation. So it turns out those two women were not just ordinary protesters, they're astroturfed activists. Now, astroturfing means they're pretending to be grassroots, ordinary people. They're not. They're activists. One of them is co-executive director of the Soros-funded left-wing group Center for Democracy and Center for Democracy Action Fund. The women's names are Maria Gallagher and Anna Maria Archila. And basically, Jeff Flake got played. The GOP got played. They got suckered. And here is where it gets even better. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has accidentally let slip that Anna Maria Archila is an illegal alien, not even supposed to be in the country. Then we have the other friend, Monica McLean, the person that Ford's ex-boyfriend said that Ford coached on how to pass a polygraph examination. And it appears that Monica McLean did in fact work for the FBI. And that raises a legal problem for Monica. Because if Monica knew that Ford was committing perjury, Monica had a legal obligation to inform the FBI that she knew Christine Ford was lying about that polygraph test. Monica could lose her security clearance over this. So, and right at the 11th hour, just when the Democrats needed it, Kamala Harris comes up with a letter claiming Kavanaugh and a friend repeatedly raped a woman in the back seat of a car after giving her a lift home from a party. The woman, of course, is anonymous. No date, no time, absolutely nothing to back it up. It's just, yes, Kavanaugh gave me a ride home from a party, and he and his friend raped me multiple times in the back seat. End of story. This is desperation on the cusp of madness. if that had really happened, wouldn't this girl have, like, called the police, told her parents or something? I mean, this feminist Get Kavanaugh agenda is creating an image of women who can be raped with impunity because they'll never tell. They'll never call the police. They'll never tell anybody about it. It'll be 30, 40 years down the road when you're being nominated for a Supreme Court seat that all of a sudden they'll say, yes, it happened. Absolutely. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And as I mentioned at the top of the program, this whole sexual assault fiasco is falling apart. The wheels have come off of it. And so now the Democrats, they're desperate. They brought up this issue where Kavanaugh was spoken to by police in a bar fight where apparently he threw some ice at somebody. You know, like, wow, there's a career wrecker. And now, of course, they're talking about his drinking. And it is no secret that many politicians drink. In fact, remember at the State of the Union when Ruth Bader Ginsburg fell asleep? She's admitted she was drunk. So it goes with the job. But everybody's still out there hurling accusations, and Adam Schiff was out there just screaming. For 2 years we've seen how the flaw of this deeply unethical man in the Oval Office has infected the whole of government. But watching the audience laugh at Trump's ridicule of a sexual assault survivor, we see the damage runs much deeper and debases our public discourse. So now they're attacking Donald Trump because he got up there and basically laid out Ford's entire case. You assaulted me. Oh, where did it happen? I don't remember. When did it happen? I don't remember. Did you report it to the police? I don't remember. All she remembers is she had a beer here. But there was a rebuttal to Adam Schiff that came out of Your Perception Is Not Reality that Schiff has to be kidding. The whole Democratic Party is flawed, and what they did to Judge Kavanaugh is anything but ethical. They tried to ruin the man's life for no other reason than political gain. And that's exactly what was going on. And I hope all of America is paying attention to that because it will impact the elections. I'm already seeing stories on the corporate media about how this might have an impact on the midterm elections in 5 weeks. And the Democrats were kind of counting on the women who voted for Trump in 2016 to not bother going to the polls in November. This whole display may in fact have motivated the Republicans to get on out there. And so we'll see. In fact, I saw 2 polls where Democrats are starting to slide versus the Republicans. All right, we're going to take a phone call from James in North Carolina. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah, Mike, how you doing? This proposal from Senator Feinstein to keep the results of the FBI investigation, to keep it sealed, I'm assuming they're going to have that put in the sub-basement of the Capitol, and you can't carry any recording equipment, and you have to go into the room naked.
Ooh, that's a terrible image. That's a terrible image.
But it's one thing I keep wondering about, and I just can't believe how it is that the Democrats manage to get more of their agenda accomplished as a minority than the Republicans do as a majority. I mean, it seems like over and over again that whenever the Democrats run up against any kind of resistance, they double down and just come back at you twice as hard. Whereas the Republicans, the first thing they do is try and find some place to run and hide.
Well, I wouldn't describe it as that. I think what the Republicans' leadership understood is that this whole confirmation fiasco was going to make the Democrats look bad. And I think it was a conscious decision to take the high road, to not be combative, to basically go along with the Democrats as much as possible, because everybody's been watching this confirmation circus, and the Republicans are coming out of it, looking like they're still politicians that understand the rules, and the Democrats have come out of it looking like hysterical, screaming memes that are willing to lie and destroy men's lives just for political gain.
Well, I mean, I understand that that strategy, but it just seems to me that the Republicans just don't have a stomach for a fight when they need to put up one. It seems like Lindsey Graham is the only Republican I've seen that's shown any stones in the hearings, and you see what they're now doing to him.
Yes,
with these slurs about his being a closeted gay.
What's really ironic, of course, is the Democrats are supposed to be the party, that it supports LGBT, and yet when somebody does something they don't like, oh, he's a closet gay, we got to get him out of the closet. I'll be honest, I don't care if Lindsey Graham is gay. I really don't, and I'm tired of politicians trying to use these kinds of things as weapons. Let's go back and talk about what Kavanaugh's rulings have been in the past, because we didn't get a lot of that. But I want this thing to just be over, and it has degenerated into a circus, and I think the Republicans deliberately gave the Democrats enough rope to hang themselves in the eyes of the public. The optics on this thing have been terrible, and I got a couple of stories coming up about that. Okay?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. So Joe Scarborough is out there calling out the Democrats and even the media on this hit job, this smear job on Kavanaugh. Now, Scarborough says that if he were a senator, he would not vote for Brett Kavanaugh to be on the Supreme Court. But that doesn't mean he's happy with how the judge was being treated. And that's exactly my point of view. I have issues with Kavanaugh. I have issues with his interpretation of the Fourth Amendment. I have issues with his participation in the cover-up of the murder of Vincent Foster. Okay, but we have to remain a nation of rules, a nation of ethics, a nation where everybody is playing by the same playbook and not just out there screaming hysterically and hurling lies and smear jobs to destroy their political enemies. I mean, this goes, again, back to the Clintons, the politics of personal destruction. Somebody's in your way, you find a way to destroy their character and ruin their reputation. And, I went through this myself after that Vince Foster situation when I got blacklisted out of Hollywood. People were spreading around some, pretty nasty things about me. None of them were true, of course, here. So, as you know, over this last weekend, Saturday Night Live basically piled onto Kavanaugh. And what was interesting is it came out less than a year after the very same Saturday Night Live came out in full support for serial groper Al Franken. And remember, there was a photograph of Al Franken groping the breasts of a sleeping woman, which apparently he thought that was funny. And so you have, again, the media bias is on display. If it's a Democrat, it's cool. Yeah, it's just a little, horsing around and grope. If it's a Republican, oh my goodness, he touched her little finger without permission. Now, somebody ran a poll online. Is Brett Kavanaugh suited to be our next Supreme Court justice? And here are the results as of the last time I checked. Yes, Judge Kavanaugh has an impeccable record, and these salacious claims are just false. 9,078 votes. No, there are serious and credible accusations being made against Judge Kavanaugh. He should not be allowed to be on the Supreme Court. That one got only 613 votes. Then there was the third category of not sure. There are serious accusations, but based on witness corroboration, they could be false. That got 235 votes. So the public didn't buy this. The public didn't buy this. And again, people who are close to my AGE, remember, they went through the same thing with Clarence Thomas. They tried to do it in Trump in 2016. And the sides are just polarizing. It's getting more polarized every single day. The other day we were talking about this associate professor of security studies over at Georgetown University, Dr. Carol Christine Fair. And she tweeted on out, look at this chorus of entitled white men justifying a serial rapist's arrogated entitlement. All of them deserve miserable deaths while feminists laugh as they take their last gasps. Bonus, we castrate their corpses and feed them to the swine. Yes, end quote. Now that's a pretty shocking tweet. And in an age where institutions very often take umbrage for people's social media posts outside their official duties, you would have thought Georgetown University might want to step on in and say that was not an appropriate thing to do. Nope. Georgetown University is backing this lady 100%. Okay. What's going on here? It goes beyond the accusations. It's psychological terrorism. And by throwing all these accusations, even if they turn out to be false, it's going to sever associations that Kavanaugh has had for a lot of years. People are not going to want to be seen with him because they're going to get tarnished by that smear, even though it was proven false. It's part of the herd instinct, I guess. And again, I went through that after my blacklisting following the murder of Vince Foster. People I'd known in the business for years refused to talk to me, would cross the street to just not be seen with me. It's amazing. Story coming out of oons.com, and more people are realizing that in their quest to get Brett Kavanaugh, the Democrats have in fact revived the 1990s militant feminist, male bash, all men are rapists playbook, if you will. And white heterosexual males, we're being renditioned to the punishment hole. And we've seen the feminists, rather than, and again, this goes back to that book, Who Stole Feminism by Christine Hobbs Summers, where the original feminists were all about equality. Equal pay for equal work, equal access to credit and education. These were all good things. They wanted women to stand as equals to men. The militant feminists who hijacked it wanted to reverse the order. They wanted women dominant and men subordinate. And that was, again, part of the rationale back in the 1990s of encouraging women to hurl false accusations of rape. And right now, it's all about men are bad, men are rapists, men hate women, misogyny. And feminists seem to love misogyny because without it, their lives would be completely bleak and devoid of any meaning. It's like I was saying about the liberals the other day. They're not offended. They're looking for things to be offended by. Because without something to be offended by, they don't have anything. Their entire identity, their self-image is built around being offended and out there screaming for social justice and for men to use the women's ladies' room here. Now, there's going to be a backlash. We saw that in the 1990s. We saw with the collapse of the rape hysteria that real rape victims were often ignored by police departments who'd been sued for previous false arrests. And there's this other article over in the American Thinker which is predicting the backlash from what we just saw in Washington, D.C. There's going to be a backlash against men interacting with women. And so there's this article that came on out and it said, why hire a woman where, at any moment they can come up with an accusation with no proof required and destroy you? Why would you interact with a woman in a professional setting without lots and lots of witnesses? And that makes it more trouble than it's really worth. The genders are going to be split apart by this. And some of it gets really silly. I mean, there was an article that came out of the Washington Post saying that consent had to be, very specific and explicit. That if it wasn't absolutely, rock hard and clear that the woman was saying yes, that it wasn't really consent. And again, back in the 1990s, there was this attitude that if a woman consented to have sex with a man and woke up the next day with regrets, that could be reconstructed as sexual assault. We're all the way back there. All the progress that was made since the 1990s has been destroyed. Now, as I mentioned before, our society is clearly polarizing. And Russia Today came out with an article saying that if you're tired of the political divide in America, don't worry, it's going to get much worse. And they're basically saying that the polarization is now so bad, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to make any progress on social or economic policies. You're just going to have the liberals and the conservatives standing on opposite sides of the room, making stink face at each other and unable to extend a hand and say, can we compromise? And that is a big, big problem. All right, well, let's get into some other areas of our domestic politics here, and we'll keep an eye on what's going on with Kavanaugh. Sheldon Adelson is now the largest single donor for the midterm elections. He's giving $55 million to Republicans so the Republicans can keep their majority in both houses of Congress and keep that Israel First agenda going. And I think Sheldon Adelson and George Soros are good arguments, for not allowing people to have that much money. And the real problem is we used to have these laws in the United States that did limit how much money any one individual could donate to a political campaign, specifically to prevent the rich from simply buying the government. And we lost those, and that's why we lost the government. That Capitol building is basically a shopping mall, probably one of the few that's still operating successfully, where all the corruptors go on up and they get out their money and they buy the government they want from under you, the American people. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And backing up to the Kavanaugh circus, Dianne Feinstein is now out there saying that this latest FBI investigation is not credible because they did not interview Christine Ford. Well, why would they need to? Christine Ford has a sworn statement. She's got her testimony before the Judiciary Committee, plus everything that she's been saying all over the media. But this is, apparently this investigation didn't find what the Democrats wanted it to find. It may have even found more damaging information. And so Dianne Feinstein wants to take it off the table completely. Not just keep it secret from the American people. She wants it off the table completely. This is desperation on the cusp of madness. Okay, let's take a phone call from Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. With the election coming up, I wanted to point out something that I think is a bit inherently problematic with exit polling. And that is that, we used a system of an Australian ballot, where our voting booths have curtains on them and, people are supposed to be able to vote, without revealing who they voted for their own protection.
Supposedly.
And I remember, supposedly, well, I can remember a time in one particular, relatively rough industrial town area in my region, where there were supposedly mob connections and unions and stuff like that, where if you, the community where if you were, if found out to have voted for the wrong person or something, your house was, you were in danger of being accosted or having your house vandalized or something like that. And so, being able to vote in private was a fairly important thing. Now, of course, after people vote and they come out, if they're approached by a pollster, they can certainly opt to decline, but I'm not interested, thanks. Okay, then that's fine, Some people are more candid or more activistic, and then I'd say, yeah, I voted for this one or that one, and here's why, and that's fine. But, I'm just thinking about, these heightened tensions and, people, protesters maybe are these bust-in people coming in and getting kind of boisterous or demanding, stuff,
Glenn, Glenn, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're almost out of time on this segment, and I want to respond to that. The purpose of exit polling is to try and confirm that the official results are, in fact, accurate. And exit pollsters simply keep count of how many people voted for what candidate. The names of the voters are not taken down. They're not recorded. So, again, their privacy is still protected.
If they're overheard or seen on site, or overheard, they could be accosted in the parking lot if somebody overhears and there's, so what I'm saying is, yeah, people, the problem is overcome if people who are concerned about that simply decline to answer a poll, so.
Yeah,
but
you do have that right here, but we need to keep the exit polling because we need every safety check we have on these elections, especially in a country with elections as crooked as we have here in the United States of America. Okay? Yes. All right, so we got to let you go, got to take a break for station identification, and we'll be back with hour number 2. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We are almost 2 years on from the 2016 elections, and Hillary Clinton is still bitter. She's still going off about it. She's supposed to be out there campaigning for the Democrats. Bill Clinton's out there also campaigning for the Democrats. Trump is out there campaigning for the Republicans. But apparently over at the Atlantic Festival, she went on a rant about how it was Russians that did it, the Russian campaign, and WikiLeaks was the cutout for the stolen information that Russia stole from our servers, which we know that part is definitely a lie. Then she rants about Cambridge Analytica and how Trump certainly altered the outcome in enough places where she can say what happened. So she's still bitter. And I don't think that's something the current Democratic voters are really interested in listening to anymore. She can't let go. She can't let go. And I am very concerned that she may try and step in 2020. They were talking about it for a little while. Then there was that bizarre cryptic message from another politician saying, please don't put your family through that. And she's backed off, but I don't think she's out yet. All right, let's talk about the war zones. There's a lot going on over there. Iran has announced basically that the missile attack it launched onto Syria on Monday killed 40 top leaders of ISIS, and that intelligence for the operation had been provided by its elite Quds force. Iran fired 6 missiles at targets in the Abu Kamal and Hajin regions in eastern Syria in retaliation for an attack on a military parade in Iran on September 22nd that killed 25 people, nearly half of them members of the Revolutionary Guards. Now, the Quds force is in charge of the Revolutionary Guard's overseas operations. So they were basically out there. By the way, something I didn't realize, you've heard the term Daesh used to describe the militants. Apparently, it's a derogatory Arabic acronym for the Islamic State. Now, the United States is starting to train Turkish soldiers for joint patrols in Syria. And they're going to be patrolling the Turkey-Syria border by Manbij. And apparently the U.S. and Turkey have been independently patrolling this border, and they just decided they have to start working together. Of course, neither the United States or Turkey has permission to be in Syria from Syria's legitimate government. Okay. WikiLeaks has uncovered a U.S. government document that revealed that the United States directly advocated for undermining democratic elements of the so-called Syrian Revolution of 2011 in order to ensure the dominance of authoritarian, sectarian Sunni groups within the Syrian opposition. Now, this document was written by the United States Marine Corps Intelligence Department in late 2011, and it further asserts that empowering these radical Sunni groups over the democratic and secular ones would be ideal for the United States and its regional partners, as ensuring the decline not only of the current Syrian government, which didn't work out, and would basically impede Iran's regional clout or influence. So that apparently is what got started with all this U.S. support for ISIS and Al-Qaeda and all these radical jihadis and everything. We had already known it was about bringing Assad down, replacing Syria's government with an obedient Western-backed government. But apparently they saw it as a way of reducing Iran's influence in the region. Boy, did that one backfire. Iran's influence in that part of the Middle East has increased, so has Russia's. From a geopolitical, strategic point of view, Syria has been a disaster. Now, as you know, Russia is pouring all kinds of electronics and weapons into Syria. And according to this report out of Middle East Monitor, Russia is going to be monitoring all air traffic in Israel, Saudi Arabia from Syria. They're going to be keeping an eye on who is flying where and what they are doing. And, pardon me, they're talking about having systems capable of combating precision weapons, guided bombs, and missiles are going to be added to the conventional radar protection systems. So they understand that with Israel unwilling to fly warplanes in to Syria, that they can expect an increase in missile attacks here. Now, here's an interesting little article. It came out of the National Interest. And I want to preface this with these stories that we reported earlier in the week about how there was a sort of a rumor running around that the Russians had succeeded in finding a way around U.S. stealth technology. And it was backed up, of course. There was that report about how a Russian Sukhoi was able to get radar lock on an F-22, and that Israel was now afraid to fly their F-35s into Syria lest one get shot down. Now, from the United States' point of view, if Russia or Syria, using Russia's weapons, are able to shoot down an F-22 or an F-35, it will be a disaster for the military-industrial complex. Other countries aren't going to want to buy these very expensive aircraft. I mean, look at the F-35. Without its stealth, it's heavy, it's clunky, it's a poor dogfighter. A lot of it still does not work properly. But there was a while back, remember, there was a report that an Israeli F-35 was struck by a Russian-made S-200 surface-to-air missile during an airstrike in Syria. Now, Israel came on out with the story, no, the plane collided with a bird. And it was he said, she said on that. But now I'm starting to lean toward that maybe Syria did get a lock on that plane. And if Russia has in fact found a way around U.S. stealth technology, that is a major game changer. Story out of Sputnik News. Israel is now expected to demand new weapons from the United States following the S-300 supply to Syria. And this is coming from Sputnik News. An Egyptian expert on Israel, Mohammed Ali, said that now that Syria has received the S-300 air defense system, Tel Aviv will insist on getting similar weapons from the United States. Well, Israel can insist, but here's the problem. Israel is already getting the best weapons the U.S. can produce. And if they're not able to deal with the Russian weapons, that's a real problem. The situation in Syria has changed drastically. Putin has brought it to a stalemate. That's what he wants. Doesn't want open conflict, but he's brought it to a stalemate. Now, as you know, when Benjamin Netanyahu went before the United Nations, he came out with a bunch of accusations against neighboring countries. It's what he does when he gets before the UN. And at least he didn't do that cartoon bomb this time. But he accused Iran of having the secret warehouse with nuclear material sitting inside. 300 tons of nuclear material, including all of these kilos of weapons-grade uranium, blah, 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 blah. And basically demanded the IAEA condemn Iran for having this. And the IAEA is saying, we have no basis to know that this is true. We're not going to take the claims at face value. And here is where it gets really good. Iranian media went on out to the buildings that were seen in Netanyahu's photograph. And one of them turned out to be a carpet cleaning company. And they have these trucks that are driving in and out with these very long rolls of carpeting. I'm sure Netanyahu thinks those have to be missiles. Those have to be missiles. And the other one is a scrap metal storage yard for recycling. And there were no guards around. There was no security. None of the heavy locks that you would and fences you would expect to see around a secret atomic warehouse. So once again, he's out there crying wolf, 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 or nuclear duck. All right, let's take a phone call from Matt in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing? I just want to know if you heard the story about the U.S. is deploying more so-called advisors to Syria.
I hadn't heard that yet, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I just saw it pop up. They're deploying more advisors to Syria. And also that Israel said they're going to deploy tactics that's never been seen before to defeat the S-300 missile defense system. I'm telling you, Mike, this thing is going to go way, way beyond anyone's expectations.
Yeah.
They're not going to walk away from this one.
No, I'm afraid that you are right. The whole region is going to go up in a major hot war, possibly involving the entire world. And I remember when I was a kid, growing up with my relatives who'd served in World War II, I remember growing up hoping that I would never have to see that with my own eyes. But it looks like I'm not going to get that wish.
Oh, yeah. See, American public's been so condensed with the pop shows and everything that's going on. None of this is shown in our media.
No.
So the average is walking around oblivious to what's taking place. Oblivious. You know, so it could be anything that could turn this thing hot. And also, I don't mean to back up, but on the Brett Kavanaugh story, it really touches home with me. You know, this is something I never told anyone. I was once accused of rape falsely. I was dragged into a police station, stuffed and cuffed and questioned, and turned out the allegation was completely false. The situation was consensual, and the young lady was caught in a bad position. Her husband had put cameras in the house. So the first thing she could think of was the claim rape. And I was caught to the wrong. I mean, I was cuffed, stuffed, and they were ready to haul me in. My story was, it was a laughing stock until I showed text messages. And the officer told me the deal was done. You know, my story was not to be believed, and I was just there for, you know, the walk the line. You know, they were just going to talk to me, and they already had the charges booked and everything. So I really feel for Brett Kavanaugh and what him and his family's going through, and it's a shame, you know, what's going on in this country and the things they will stoop to.
Well, I got to tell you, with if we are in fact returning back to this climate of a woman can just decide to scream rape at a man and ruin his life, I think I'm going to open up a sex robot franchise because there are going to be a lot of men who just aren't going to want to deal with women anymore, and who can blame them?
You're not kidding. After that situation, I was terrified to go with any interactions with another woman for months. Yeah. You know, it was horrible. I was not to be believed. I was a criminal. I was the worst thing walking, you know, and they had me handcuffed to a table, and my world was spinning out of control. I cannot believe what was being accused, you know. And, you know, but that's it. That's all I have for you. You have a good one.
Well, thanks an awful lot, Matt. We're going to let you go. And what is really interesting here is how women like that, in order to avoid their own personal embarrassment, are perfectly willing to send, you know, men to prison. There was one story, again, back in the 1990s, and I'm not going to mention names because probably they've gotten on with their lives and we don't need to embarrass them. But there was this girl who was having sex with her boyfriend, and her mother spotted some telltale signs in the laundry, while doing the laundry, in the underwear, and confronted the daughter, and the daughter said, "Oh, I was raped, because she didn't want to admit she was having sex with her boyfriend. And they just walked on out, and she just picked a random guy, and he got to go to jail. And he would probably still be in jail, but some years later, the girl became a Christian and admitted the whole thing. But again, how vicious do you have to be to just throw another human being's life into disarray to save yourself embarrassment? What does that say about our culture? All right, getting on back to the war zones here. The United Nations top court has ordered the United States to lift sanctions on humanitarian goods to Iran. And as you know, the United States has been saying lately that, frankly, they don't feel the United Nations court should have any jurisdiction over the U.S. And the U.S. government promptly threw a tantrum by terminating a 1955 treaty of amity with Iran. Just tore it on up. Now, this was a friendship treaty that was established while the Shah was in power. So they're expressing their ire over there. Meanwhile, up in France, they're accusing Iran over a foiled bomb plot of an exiled opposition group near the French capital. And they're talking the People's Mujahideen of Iran, or MEK. And France is saying it's freezing assets belonging to 2 suspected Iranian intelligence operatives, as well as others belonging to Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security. Is there any evidence forthcoming that Iran had anything to do with it? No, 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 no. We live in an age of accusation equals guilt. Proof? We don't need no proof. We believe. We believe. Now, one of the other accusations that Netanyahu made when he was up there speaking at the United Nations was that Hezbollah was building missile sites inside Lebanon to threaten Israel, to attack Israel. And Lebanon's government has now taken diplomats and journalists on a tour all around Beirut, let them go wherever they want, to basically say there are no Hezbollah bases here. And Prime Minister Netanyahu had said that Hezbollah had hidden missile sites near the international airport. And these other diplomats have said, no, they're not there. Lebanon is saying these are just false allegations to justify an attack. Yes, that's exactly what they are. Israel still wants that Litani River. They want more territory. They want more ground. Over in Saudi Arabia, first of all, they were finally forced to admit that their forces have committed what it describes as certain mistakes in Yemen. Other people describe them as war crimes. Saudi Arabia is under increasing pressure from international bodies and human rights groups that accuse the kingdom of carrying out war crimes in the country, which seems to be happening. And just hours after Saudi Arabia came clean and said, yes, we're going to try and do better, a Saudi airstrike in Yemen kills an entire family. The situation for the people of Yemen is getting really dire. About 1 million people in northern Yemen are living in makeshift camps and on the verge of famine. They're in a Houthi-controlled area that the Saudi Emirati coalition has been attacking, and it's making it difficult for aid to reach the camps. And without a ceasefire and end to the attacks, aid organizations cannot bring in the amount of food necessary for the displaced Yemenis to survive the conflict. I think this is intentional on Saudi Arabia's part. Just starve everybody to death. And again, all of this is an argument that goes back to regime change. The United States carried out a successful regime change in Yemen some years ago. The people of Yemen didn't like their puppet ruler. They're trying to take their country back. And this is the United States using Saudi Arabia as a proxy saying, no, no, no. Once you're part of the American empire, you stay a part of the American empire. You will come to love your new foreign puppet rulers. Up in Afghanistan, there's a retired Army major who's talking about the growing problem with insider attacks on our troops, where American service people inside Afghanistan are being shot and killed by people who are supposed to be on the same side that we are. So we're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a quick phone call from Jeff in Ohio. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. Real quick with the diversion of all this Kavanaugh and stuff going on, I just wanted to jump back about 3 weeks ago when our president of the United States wanted to redact and let the FISA warrants come out, and we haven't heard a thing about it since.
No, we haven't. I mean, this Kavanaugh thing has been, heaven sent to the Robert Mueller investigation, because they've come up with absolutely nothing. They have no more evidence of wrongdoing than the Kavanaugh accusers do. But now they've fallen off the public's radar. Of course, once Kavanaugh is done with the confirmation process, we're certainly going to put it back out there again, because it is an issue that needs to be dealt with.
Right. And I just researched it to go back to when he did make that statement that he demanded for this to be full disclosure, and that was on September the 17th. It seems like a year ago to me,
yeah.
As much as that, how much fast the news is moving. And I just wonder if, is Rosenstein have anything to do with releasing those, or is that with the DOJ?
That would be ultimately up to Jeff Sessions, who, as I understand it, has now been called before the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Great. That'll be put on the back burner. We'll probably never hear anything else about it. I'm getting used to this. I'm starting to figure it out. Nothing's getting done, but it's just it escaped my mind for a little bit, and I just got tired of seeing this be pushed down our throat, and everything else has been dropped aside. Everything from the foreign wars and everything else. And we just got one thing we can only concentrate on, I guess, and that's the media feeding it to us. So,
well, what we're dealing with here is a government that is at war with itself internally, to the point where it's become paralyzed. And the only progress, if you want to call it that, being made is the war spending continues. The Pentagon has handed out billions in contracts today or yesterday. So the war machine continues, and everything else is grinding to a halt. And whether this is the beginning of the dissolution of our federal government, I think that would be a good thing, to be very honest.
Right. Oh, I do too. I think I hope I don't offend anybody, but Washington needs an enema. And
yes.
I just wonder, back 100 years ago or 150 years ago, if we'd had the internet and the access of knowing what our officials are doing as we do today, if we would be in the same situation, almost holding people accountable.
Well, we have to be able to stand up and hold them accountable. And right now, the way the system is set up is the government investigates itself and holds themselves accountable, which means it never really happens. The only accountability happens when there's an election, and those are horribly compromised. I am hoping that in 5 weeks, there is going to be a red wave of outrage and disgust over what has been seen on TV these last couple of weeks.
I'm wearing red. I'm wearing red, buddy. when I go vote. But yeah, I'm just curious because I appreciate you guys, all of you guys on the radio talking, but it is getting almost to like beating a dead horse. But you guys are the only ones that are really out there, tip of the spear, taking the fight to them.
Yes.
By us having the knowledge of what's going on because we've had the wool over our eyes. So just appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Turning on down to Israel and Palestine, there's a doctor down in Gaza, and this was being reported in Al Jazeera, saying that basically looking at all the Gazans who have been killed and wounded during this great march of return, he's saying the past 6 months in Gaza, for lack of a better word, it's been another war. And there's all this human suffering and devastation, and it's only increasing. And I think an illustration of that is that Israeli forces rather, shot and killed a 78-year-old Palestinian in the Gaza Strip. And this was Ahmed Nasser al-Arouki, and he was shot and killed with 2 live bullets fired by Israeli forces. And here's where it gets interesting. He was shot in the back. This guy was a farmer, 78-year-old farmer, and he just got gunned down. Now, there's another issue that is building up. As you know, there was a Gaza Freedom Flotilla that was intercepted a while back, and it was carrying medical supplies for the people of Gaza. And it was 114 boxes of supplies like gauze and sutures, both of which are needed to deal with the grievous injuries being inflicted on the people of Gaza by the IDF. We're going to take another break for commercials. We're going to finish this story when we come on back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, which 1 month ago was intercepted by Israel's naval forces, and the basically imprisoned and deported 34 persons back to their home countries. The boats were intended to be left there for Gaza fishermen, but the real issue here is the 114 boxes of medical supplies that are desperately needed by Gaza's hospitals to deal with the grievous injuries resulting from Israel simply firing at Gazans for protesting behind that fence. And Israel still has not done so, even though it is required by international law that humanitarian aid must be delivered. And we have seen Israel do this before, where there will be food and other supplies that are sent to Gaza, and Israel will just leave it on the docks until it's so rotted it's useless. Then they'll open the gates and say, see, we're sending in the humanitarian aid. Let's take another phone call from Dan in British Columbia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Michael. Just to follow up on the 300-ton story from Netanyahu there. The Iranian foreign minister, there was a report on RT, and he came out and said Israel was the only country in the Middle East to have nuclear weapons, and they should be inspected by the IAEA. And I thought that was interesting.
Well, he made a point of saying that Israel is the only country in the Middle East with an undisclosed hidden nuclear weapons facility and an actual stockpile. And it's a point everybody keeps making. Netanyahu all but admitted to having nuclear weapons when he made that very threatening speech in front of the Dimona reactor.
Yeah, he's almost, thumbing his nose at everybody, saying, yeah, we got him, but you don't know about it on paper, And it's ridiculous. Like this 300-ton thing he came out with, I don't really think he got a lot of traction with that. I think this Kavanaugh hearing really dominated the news cycle, and he just didn't get the traction that he thought. And it just kind of reminds me of...
It's because everybody knows he keeps lying. He's been caught in lie after lie after lie after lie, and all he can think to do is when he comes back to the UN is come up with even more amazing accusations. And I think people at the UN are probably pretty sick and tired of it by now, and I know I certainly am.
It reminds me of the Get Smart, would you believe 300 tons?
You must be close to my age. That was a funny show.
My wife and I were playing Trivial Pursuit the other day, and like last week, we bought this used game at a garage sale, and we started playing it. And one of the questions was, what nation's nuclear weapons program was attacked by the Stuxnet computer virus? And I thought that was interesting. Yes. It looks like the Stuxnet thing was just for propaganda purposes, just to point the finger at
No, actually,
Iran.
Stuxnet caused a tremendous amount of damage to Iran's centrifuges. But you need to understand that Iran, under the terms of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, has a right recognized by the United States to build nuclear power stations and to manufacture the fuel rods for the same. And they were not enriching past the point that would be useful for a nuclear reactor, but Stuxnet was sent on in there, and it basically destroyed those centrifuges.
Yeah, I think there was an old advertisement. I think you might have posted it on What Really Happened. It had a picture of the Shah of Iran, and it said, "Look who's into nuclear power." And because he was, if you're a U.S. puppet, you're allowed to have nuclear power, but if you're not, then you're the devil himself. So I'll let you get back to the show.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. Yeah, I remember that ad. I think I still have it in my archive. When the Shah was there, they were using him to say, see, nuclear power is good. And I think they ran the ad at a time when there was a growing concern within the United States that nuclear power might not be entirely safe, which 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, Fukushima, I think the point is made there. Getting on back to Gaza, 89% of the population of Gaza do not have access to safe drinking water. This is coming from the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. And according to the report, only 11% of Palestinian families in Gaza have access to safe sources of drinking water. And apparently punitive measures imposed by the Palestinian Authority, President Abbas, on Gaza was cited as one of the main reasons leading to the dire situation in Gaza. It's so frustrating. It was not that long ago when the Palestinian Authority and Hamas seemed to be working together to make life in Palestine a lot better. Then all of a sudden Abbas says, no, Hamas has to go. Palestinian Authority will control the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And it's gone downhill from there. In 2017, Abbas imposed a lot of measures on the Strip, trying to pressure the people to turn against Hamas. And some of the things he did were halving salaries of public employees, forcing thousands of employees to early retirement, and stopping payments for the supply of electricity to the Strip. This is supposed to be the Holy Land. And you look at all that is going on in there, and you have to wonder what's going on here. I get a lot of emails asking why I'm an atheist. This is the reason. Seeing all this suffering and all this pain, supposedly where Christianity began, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. The United Nations Relief Agency for Palestine is pulling some of their staff from Gaza. They're concerned about security risks because they think there's going to be a lot of civil unrest over job cuts. Somebody did a poll, well, actually it was Pew Research did a poll in Israel and found the Israelis extremely and almost unanimously supportive of Trump and U.S. foreign policy. It was 82% of the Jewish Israelis trust the president's handling of global affairs. 94% have favorable opinion of the U.S. Is anyone surprised? Trump and the U.S. is giving Israel everything they want and asking for very, very little in return. Yeah, if you just give a lot, if you give somebody a lot of really great stuff, they're going to think you're a great person. They're not going to want to hear about bad things you may have done. You just keep the goodies coming, keep the money coming, keep the weapons company. We love you. We think you're great. Now, there's a very alarming story that came out from the Middle East Monitor, and they're quoting a member of the Knesset, Moti Yogev, who came on out and said that Israel will now extend its sovereignty over the entire area between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. In other words, over all of historic Palestine. And this gentleman is part of the Jewish Home Party. And he's out there saying there had been no Palestinian state. There will never be a Palestinian state. Israel will remain Jewish. So that means they're getting ready to just formally annex the Gaza Strip and the West Bank and declare it Israeli territory. Now, Moti, of course, is incorrect. There was a Palestinian state. And I have this page I put up about all the historical maps showing Palestine, but that's been one of the big lies that Israel has used ever since they were created. No, there's no such thing as Palestine. Somebody just made it up to annoy us here. So, anyway. Now, the United States, again, giving Israel everything that they want and responding probably to Jeremy Corbyn saying that a Labour government in Great Britain will recognize the Palestinian state. And by the way, a lot of other governments around the world already have. But the United States is saying, no, Palestine is not a state. And they have now withdrawn from the Vienna Convention's optional protocol. Here you have the U.S. just pulling out of treaties, the one with Iran, the Vienna Convention, left and right. And yet the U.S. ambassador to NATO was out there screaming that Russia was in violation of this treaty that goes back to the Cold War. The U.S. is in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This is why the rest of the world isn't really trusting our government anymore. There's an article out here, again, this is from Mint Press News. Anti-Semitism as a sword, aggressive tactics on Israel's behalf may threaten all Jews. And they're basically repeating something that I've talked about a lot on this program, that it is Israel's behavior coupled with their attempt to blend Israel with all of the world's Jews that presents a threat to all the world's Jews. This particular article, of course, is talking about this insane push to convince corrupted, bought and paid for governments around the world to redefine anti-Semitism as any criticism of the government of Israel. That it's hatred of the Jewish people, which is silly. That's like claiming that the only reason people complain about the Nazis is they hate the German people. But this article is saying there very well is going to be a pushback at this very overt attempt to suppress freedom of speech. And if Israel succeeds in carving out an exception in the First Amendment for criticizing Israel, that won't be the end of it. There'll be another exception for criticizing vaccines or for doubting GMOs. Okay, over in East Jerusalem, the Israeli forces raided an East Jerusalem cemetery, destroying the tombstones of slain Palestinians. And according to the supervisor of the cemetery, armed Israeli forces were deployed at the entrance of the cemetery, and officers raided the cemetery and destroyed several tombstones using a variety of hand tools. Apparently, these were marked tombstones of Palestinians who've been killed by the IDF back in October of 2015. And it's amazing to see this when you have, anytime there's a Jewish tombstone that's vandalized, oh, Israel goes crazy. Israel just goes totally crazy. They go ahead and they do it to the Palestinians. Now, from my point of view, I'm wondering why anybody cares. You know, tombstone, nice, whatever. But there is a core feeling in many of the religions in the Middle East that some part of you lives on as long as you are being remembered. Maybe they got that through Amenhotep in ancient Egypt, that if your name is preserved, that somewhere out there you still exist. And that's maybe why the tombstones are such a hot button item. U.S. Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis has announced the U.S. will not reduce its support for the French-led military operations against insurgents in Mali. We're all over the place here. We're all over the place here. So they're going to pour money into that one here. This could really start a major conflict in Africa. Namibia has announced they are now going to follow the example of South Africa by expropriating white-owned lands and redistributing them to the majority black population. I hope this is not going to turn into a global phenomenon. We know that Zimbabwe did it, South Africa, and now Namibia. This could spread all over Africa and plunge the place into complete and utter chaos here. North Korea has sent a message through their state media that a peace declaration to formally end the Korean War is not a bargaining chip in the denuclearization talks. Lifting sanctions might be. They still want that peace declaration, but at this point, it's papering over the reality. North and South Korea are clearly moving back together. They're starting to clean up the landmines at the demilitarized zone. They're going to open up communication back and forth. It will take years to do that. They have now administratively linked their military. And for all intents and purposes, the Korean War is now over. And maybe that's why Kim Jong-un is not feeling that a peace declaration is really worth all that much. The reality on the ground is, yeah, it's over. It is really over. North and South Korea are learning to get along together. Ultimately, there's going to be reunification. The United States government's going to want to try and thwart that. Okay, U.S. Ambassador to NATO Hutchison kicked up a bit of a storm a couple of days, saying that Russia was building a ground-launched intermediate-range cruise missile system, nuclear-tipped, that was a violation of the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, and that as a result, the United States might consider a military strike onto the factory where these weapons are being built. You know, that's an act of war, flying into somebody else's country and blowing stuff up here. And the Russian response has been rather dismissive. It's impossible to take this seriously, and a reminder that the United States is also in violation of the INF Treaty with their Mark 41 launching systems, capable of firing ground-based cruise missiles. Now, they are warning that any kind of an attack on Russia would be met with a full-range attack back. In other words, not a measured response. You hit us, it's on for real. Now, Hutchison has since gone to Twitter to say, no, she didn't really say that. But it's already out there here. Here's an article, came out of Reuters, and it's basically confirming something I said, I think only about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, that the American military is over-dependent on imports from other countries, and especially China, which could be a problem given current circumstances. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're looking at this story about how the U.S. military is coming to grips with over-reliance on imports, especially those from China. And apparently this was a review by the Pentagon, ordered by Donald Trump, and basically listing out all the instances where the U.S. military is depending on foreign countries for critical components. And they're talking about things like microelectronics, integrated circuits, transistors, that kind of stuff. And yeah, especially right now with the tensions building against China, China could shut that off at any point, and that would be a crippling blow, because it would take a lot of time to ramp up production of those same items here in the United States of America. This was in USA Today. If we're headed for regime change in Iran, get ready for a military draft. We'll need one. And I hate to say I told you so, but here it comes. And so USA Today is already putting out the idea that, yeah, we're going to have a draft if we're going to regime change Iran. Well, I got a better idea. Let's leave Iran alone, okay? But over in Military Times, they have an article on just how restarting the military draft would proceed, because it's been 4 decades of an all-volunteer force. And they say there'll be problems, but it can be done. So yeah, they're talking about it seriously. A draft. Those of you who are parents of military-aged kids, you better be paying attention right now. And you better be sharing this with your friends and neighbors, okay? Now, remember the other day that Turkey came on out and declared that they were going to conduct operations against supporters of Fethullah Gulen and implied assassinations on our soil. And one may have happened this morning. There was a security guard outside the home of Fethullah Gulen who spotted an armed intruder and fired a warning shot. The intruder left. The police were called, but it does look like Turkey was very serious about its overseas operations against supporters of Mr. Gulen. It looks like they went right to the top here. So let's talk about Julian Assange, because it is looking very, very bad for him. An Ecuadorian lawmaker is urging authorities to now strip Julian Assange of his Ecuadorian citizenship, claiming that there were irregularities when it was granted. And if he was stripped of his citizenship, he would no longer be an Ecuadorian diplomat, and he would be expelled from the Ecuadorian embassy, at which point he could be arrested and extradited to the United States and or Great Britain. What caused Ecuador to change their mind? Well, apparently they got a big chunk of cash, $997 million that was being put into Ecuador's economy, and apparently with it came this little condition that, yeah, it's time for Julian Assange to be made an example of. Alrighty. So I'm afraid that Assange is headed for a U.S. prison. They're going to try and make an example of him. And the funny thing is, Assange himself did nothing. He was an editor. Okay, there's my music. I was kind of wondering where it was. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're going to skip back to the Kavanaugh Carnival because there is a new development where apparently Christine Ford and her lawyers are refusing to turn over her polygraph results for independent verification and therapy notes. Now, as far as the polygraph is concerned, it's now been revealed she knows how to beat a polygraph test. The reason the therapy notes are key is because Ford said that was the first time she told anybody about that. And that would be a critical piece of evidence. But apparently, lawyer Deborah Katz penned a letter to Judiciary Committee Charles Grassley. They will not turn over these items. So looks like they've got something to hide. Oh, man. It is just insane. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Insanity is the name of the game, isn't it?
It really is.
Oh, yeah. I originally called about Assange. A few weeks back, I had read something about the Ecuadorians were getting ready to expel him. It's exactly like you said. I mean, exactly what did this guy do? All he did was he edited something that pointed the finger at a bunch of people. In other words, the truth about what's going on. People aren't as dumb as they used to be, even just 10, 15 years ago. Well, I shouldn't say dumb, ill-informed as they used to be, like 10 or 15 years ago. If something like that were to happen where Assange were to be kicked out, and obviously as soon as he walks out, I think the British are right there, aren't they, with some police or whoever, and they would pick him up and extradite him back to the United States. People would know right then and there, you know what? This is it's another Iron Curtain.
Yes.
Obviously, there's no freedom of speech. That's gone. It's absolutely wiped out. And not to mention that the people that are running the show, i.e. the owners and and their puppet politicians, are protected. And we already know that's the fact, but it's on full display there. So, I mean, if it were to happen, it may be a good thing. But, there's always going to be these people that say, oh, well, this is great. Well, this is great news. This is great news. It's not great news.
No, it isn't.
It's not great news. It's just another nail in the coffin, isn't it, Mike?
I'm afraid so. I mean, apparently over at Gab, which we've been pushing as an alternative to some of the big corporate social media, apparently because they are still carrying Alex Jones, their payment processors are threatening to cut them off or have cut them off. They had 2 payment processors. And so, yeah, it's basically trying to bring down, not maybe an iron curtain, but definitely a silicon curtain.
Yeah. Well, censorship by any other name. I have a question for you. Knowing what we already know about Brett Kavanaugh, this Brett Kavanaugh case, for instance, the remodeling, the second door on the house, her coaching people to take polygraphs, like all of this stuff. Do you actually think that this will be uncovered with an FBI investigation, or do you think it'll be just swept under the rug?
Well, at this point, this last FBI investigation was a political exercise where, the Republicans wanted to say, yes, we're going to go along here and, have one more investigation. But obviously, from this latest talk about keeping it all secret, the investigation didn't find anything, or even worse, it found more information to discredit the accusers. And that may be why Dianne Feinstein wants this thing to be kept secret, so they can keep pounding Kavanaugh with the accusations and saying, we don't really know. The evidence is still locked up. Feinstein is now making a big deal that the FBI investigation is discredited because they didn't talk to Kavanaugh and Ford. But as I mentioned before, there's no point. Ford issued a sworn deposition. That's her statement. And Kavanaugh has been testifying left and right. He's been answering questions to the Judiciary Committee. There's nothing more to be gleaned there. There's no reason for the FBI to include them in this latest investigation. What the FBI did was they went on out to all the people who were being held up as being able to corroborate the accusations coming from these women and re-interview them again. And that was it. But Feinstein is looking to find, again, it's delay. And Mitch McConnell wants to get a vote on this done by the end of the week. I would agree. I'm sick and tired of this stuff. We've got more important things to be talking about right now. But would not be surprised if the Democrats try and start a filibuster and just stall as long as they can with the filibuster, just to keep this from happening. And it really is disgusting to see it all happen.
Yeah, it is disgusting, Mike. One has to wonder, how do these people get elected?
Well, they
I
use
don't understand.
electronic
really
voting
don't.
machines. Yeah, there's vote fraud is just epidemic in this country.
I cannot imagine being in a position where I could act like some of these people, just the blatant lies, the deception, I don't understand it, Mike. I appreciate your time. You're doing a great job. As long as you're on air, I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna support you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the support. We definitely need it. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to take another phone call from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. I couldn't help when you told me about the draft. I mean, haven't we been talking about this constantly about that's where we're headed? And sure enough, I just want to say something again to people. I don't know how many people remember the 1960s and the draft riot. Where they say the riots and the services about the draft then, the Vietnam War. This would be multiplied many different times today. And I just want to also give a warning to. I told you already that I'm Jewish ancestry. I don't practice Judaism, but I am of Jewish ancestry. So I want to give a warning to other Jews. You think anti-Semitism, you talk about anti-Semitism, because people are against Israel or whatever nonsense, which of course has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It's a rogue nation that's out of control, and it's causing trouble. People will blame Israel, and they unfortunately will blame the average Jew if this happens, because there will be people drafted, there'll be, young boys will be sent off to die in a war with Iran. If it means invading Iran, it would be a guerrilla warfare that would make probably Vietnam look tame. Of course, Russia might get involved. Who knows? I mean, my opinion is Putin would just sit back and let the United States mess itself up, kind of like when the Soviet Union destroyed itself in Afghanistan. But who knows? I just don't understand. I just don't understand these people, Mike. What's going on? The people in charge of this country. Why do they let this little nothing of a country hold us by the nose or by the by the private part and tell us what to do? And this maniac, who's there, the head of Israel, Netanyahu, they treat him like he's some kind of a god when he comes to the United States, goes to Congress. I mean, I just don't understand it, Mike. I mean, maybe you could explain to me. I don't know if it's money. I don't know what it is. Brainwashing. It's hard to say.
Well, it's a combination of multiple factors. Obviously, money is a big part of it, and we have this organization in the United States called AIPAC, which basically monitors all members of Congress, and those who toe the Israel line get lots and lots of money. Those who don't, the money goes to their opponents in the next election. And it is a completely corrupted system, and our nation is being preyed upon by Israel. And we can see the results around us. This country is on the verge of collapse and death, at which point Israel will simply find another country to parasitize.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just, I think what Putin should do, too, is just, I told you yesterday, we've got thousands of nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them. Just give Iran maybe 5 or 10 of them. That's enough. That should be enough of a deterrent to tell Israel, keep your nasty hands off of Iran and the rest of the Middle East, or else. Because you may have 200 or 300 weapons, 5 or 10, it's only take about 1 or 2, and that'll be the end. Maybe that's the best thing. And but as far as this country goes, as far as the United States goes, I told you yesterday, I think a lot of these leaders of ours are on drugs. Okay, like when you see somebody like the former senator they had K. Bailey Hutchinson, or the other so-called Admiral Zinke. I got to wonder if these people are on Prozac or something like that. I mean,
they might well be. They might well be. I mean, there's actually a pharmacy inside the Capitol building. So, yeah, there does seem to be a demand.
They both come from the Cold War era. Both of them come from the Cold War era. So they should remember how frightening that was with the U.S. and the Soviet Union facing off. And this is a lot worse because we were never this close to them. Like in Syria, one mistake and that could be it. And we almost had those mistakes with the Soviet Union numerous times, not just during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So you think these people get it to their heads? This is serious business. We got to stop this. We got to start minding our own business, bring our troops home from the four corners of the world, and take care of this country. We can put them at the border in the meantime until they start building a wall that we need. Do something. But this got to stop. This costs over $1 trillion a year to fund this thing, this military-industrial complex. We could have a real national health care system that would work, something that could actually serve the people. If we could, and not to mention a lot of other nice things that we could have in this country, if we just stopped it. I'll leave the rest up to you, Mike. I mean, you know.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. And yeah, the issue is that this country, this government, embarked on this war agenda back in the 1990s. A lot of the policy focused on this organization, the Project for the New American Century, which basically said the next century, the 21st century, will be the century of America. The rest of the world will bow to us. And it basically said, yeah, there's going to be a lot of war, there's going to be a lot of death, there's going to be a lot of destruction, but it's a sacrifice we're willing to make. And the U.S. government accepted the policy position and said, yeah, we're the sole remaining superpower on earth. Let's go and act like it and start taking over all these countries, make sure that they use the U.S. dollar, make sure that their resources are available to us. And they basically bet the farm on it. They have diverted so much money away from the rest of our society, not just infrastructure, but manufacturing and the rest of it. Right now, if you look at just how much of our gross domestic product, how much of our economic activity is tangled up one way or the other with the military, if peace were to break out tomorrow, the U.S. economy would collapse. So they're kind of stuck. They can't turn around and go back. They can't get up there and say, we made a mistake, this is a bad idea, or it would all implode on them. So they're going to keep on going until, victory or death, and I'm afraid it's going to be death here. Okay. Apparently, Kanye West was on TMZ Live on Monday, and the host, Harvey Levin, asked him to remove his MAGA hat because it was going to make people feel uncomfortable. And West came on back and said, you can't bully me. I'm going to wear the hat. Now, there is no right to not be uncomfortable in the Bill of Rights. There is a right to freedom of expression. And one of the ways the political correctness movement has just gone so totally overboard is their demand that everybody conduct their behavior, everybody control their speech, everybody dress so as not to offend anybody around them. But when you have an entire segment of our culture whose entire self-image is based on always being offended, that's an impossibility. So why bother? And I think more and more people are getting that idea. Okay, what I say offends you. Fine, be offended. I don't care. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the economic news here. The emerging markets are in serious trouble. A lot of money was invested in there. And now they're dealing with rising oil prices and weakening currencies. And people are concerned. There's a big crash out there somewhere waiting to happen. A big economic tsunami. Nobody knows where it's coming from. Everybody's pointing fingers in different directions. Over in Hong Kong, home prices have fallen for the first time in 29 months. And that's being seen as a significant indicator. Let's take a phone call. We're going to go to Cameron in the United Kingdom. Aloha, Cameron. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. Good afternoon, Michael. Just a quick question about Julian Assange. And I mean, I'm mentioning this in hope that maybe somebody who's in charge in these countries that I'm going to mention hear this. I think countries like Iran, like China, like Russia could score a very, very big point by actually sort of giving Julian Assange a citizenship and employ them in the embassy as a sort of a low official, give them a diplomatic passport, and that way just get them out. I mean, that would really, take US and UK off. But I mean, I think that's a good thing if they do that.
I think it would be a good thing as well. I think it would be a good thing if, Assange. First of all, my question is, where the heck is Australia in all of this? Because Assange is an Australian citizen, and he should be allowed to go. He probably should have originally gone to the Australian embassy in the first place to seek asylum. But he's stuck there in the Ecuadorian embassy because if Ecuador strips him of his citizenship and his diplomatic status, then he's basically fair game the instant he steps outside that building. And we know that the United States wants to make an example of him. They want to discourage whistleblowers or those who quote whistleblowers. They've got a lot of secrets to hide. Too many of those secrets are coming on out. And there's a real crackdown, that's coming. And we don't know how much longer we're going to be able to continue doing what we do. But we're going to do it just as long as we can. We need your support to do it. But yeah, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen to Assange, and very concerned about the direction the entire world is going. It seems like the leaders of all of these countries have all gone crazy, and that last caller may be right. It may be the result of the modern pharmaceutical industry, which has loaded up everybody's life with all of these medications that are now admitted to have psychological effects. And have we drugged our entire planet to the edge of insanity is a legitimate question at this point.
Well, it seems like that. I mean, UK and everybody actually, as if everybody's out of their mind in government, which is, we're getting used to it, and that's a bad thing. Anyway, Michael, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And let's see what we've got here. Apparently, there was a letter sent to the president. We're just following up on this. And apparently a former Navy sailor is now linked to the suspicious mail. The white powdery substance scare at Ted Cruz's office turned out to be a false alarm. More when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economic news. And September was a very bad month for Ford and General Motors. And basically, General Motors stopped giving out monthly numbers of new vehicle deliveries earlier this year and switched to quarterly releases. And today it reported its third quarter new vehicle deliveries. They plunged 11% compared to a year ago to 694,000 cars and light trucks. All of its brands lost ground. And basically, based on Bloomberg's survey of analysts, GM sales in the month of September plunged 14%. And this includes like the Silverado, Sierra pickups. These are hot vehicles. They're supposed to be popular, and they're just not selling. And with the price of new cars about to go up because of the tariff wars, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse. Okay, let's grab a phone call now from Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you had some callers talk about Julian Assange and the whistleblowers. I think it was, I'm going to say sometime in August, I was flipping around, I saw on C-SPAN that they actually have a National Whistleblowers Day, which I did not know. So I guess selectively the United States cares about whistleblowing, but, depends how far you go with it. If it embarrasses the government and shows war crimes, then that's a bad thing. But I'm not sure. I'd never heard of it before. It's the first time forever. National Whistleblowers Day. And I am deeply bothered by, this president we have currently here that pointing out a war crime could have you go into hiding. And I thought we'd learned something from past wars about atrocities, Vietnam, definitely the My Lai massacre, certain things like that, that coming forward and telling the truth would be a good thing to stop future atrocities, war crimes, but I guess we're on this pathway still. We can continue doing what we're doing, nation building and war crimes along the way, and that's supposed to be kept secret. If then somebody comes forward, that's a bad thing. I'm deeply bothered by it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for people who have something to hide, whistleblowers are a bad thing. There actually used to be laws in this country protecting whistleblowers. And because whistleblowers do serve a legitimate function in keeping corporations and government accountable. But they've been chipped away over time, and the United States may mouth their praise and support of whistleblowers, but right now whistleblowers have no more protection. I remember back when TWA 800 was accidentally shot down, one of the first things that happened is whistleblower protection for those Navy units involved in the recovery was immediately withdrawn. So, yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that also, but I didn't even know it existed. Like I said, National Whistleblower Day, I can't pin the day on it. It was on C-SPAN. They were talking about they were giving medals or certificates away, and I had never heard of such a thing, and then I see what's happening here, and blowing the whistle on those journalists being killed in Afghanistan and covering that up, and I'm pretty certain Pat Tillman was taken out also. That wasn't friendly fire, but you know, this is a bad direction to go when a whistleblower telling the truth and honesty is treated like a villain himself, and yes. I am very bothered by that.
Yeah, that's the world that we live in. Those who lie are rewarded and promoted and glorified, and those who are telling the truth are treated like we're the bad guys. We're the villains. We're the evil ones. You know, we're anti-American. We're unpatriotic if we want the truth. If you're a loyal American, you will believe the bovine excrement we shovel at you. Seems to be the attitude coming out of both the government and the corporate media.
That's it, Mike. Hey, thanks. Great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Steve. We're going to let you go here. The retail Mageddon is picking up speed. Sears, JCPenney, Brookstone, and Mattress Firm are heading toward bankruptcy. In fact, Mattress Firm may declare bankruptcy just in the next few days. And they're looking to basically get out of their store leases and shut down some of its 3,000 locations that are losing money. And again, the reason is simple. People don't have money to spend. You know, mattresses have actually become very expensive. And you can't have those two trend lines not cross each other sooner or later. And that's what's going on here. Over at the S&P 500, the percentage of unprofitable United States initial public offerings is now basically at the same level that we saw during the dot-com era. A lot of money being put into these IPOs. Not all of them are performing very well. And another indicator, things are not really going very well. Huntington Bank is now planning to close 70 of their branches in Ohio and Michigan. And we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be back with more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I was watching the Fox News feed over during the commercial break. And Immigration Customs Enforcement is saying there's all of a sudden, there's been a major increase in the number of illegal immigrants just coming across the border. And I wonder if that's the Democrats recruiting more illegal voters for the midterm elections. Congress actually tried to pass a resolution condemning voting by illegal immigrants, and the majority of Democrats refused to sign it, refused to vote yes. They love their illegal immigrant voters. They're depending on them now. Probably sent out another message. More free stuff, more free stuff. Just get on up here, vote for us. We'll take stuff away from the American citizens and we'll give it to you. Somewhat variation on a theme that we're seeing down in South Africa and Namibia. All right, we're going to take a phone call. James in Tokyo. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How are you, Michael? You have to give a commendation to the guy in the control room. I told him I was Maxwell Smart from Du Bois, Iowa, but he understood who I was right away, and I failed that security check. So give the guy a commendation.
Okay, I certainly will. So what's on your mind today?
One question about the economy. Like we're talking about the Amazon with the $15 an hour. I left the U.S. in 1990, maybe. Yeah, around 1990, 1989. I can't remember. I was making probably $10 an hour. I don't know, $20,000 a year before I went away. And do you think that $15 an hour, which is like, I don't know, maybe $2,400 a month, can people live off that in America where they have to pay all the health and everything?
Not really, and it's not really all that generous of Amazon, because they may have increased the minimum wage and announced it to the press, but in the process they cut out the bonuses and the stock option plan. So in reality, the Amazon employees are actually winding up in worse position than they were before.
I'm not talking about the Amazon. I'm just talking, can a person, because I'm in Japan, so can somebody in America live, comfortably for $2,400 a month?
No, I don't see anywhere where that could be. I mean, rents are sky high, and maybe out in extreme rural areas you could get away with it. But then, if you're in an extreme rural area, what do you do for a living? How do you do a job? The problem is that all of our economic activity is concentrated in the cities. That's where all the jobs are. But at the same time, that's where the standard of living is more costly.
That's all I wanted to know. Because I'm not around. I don't have the feeling for it like you do. And when I read the news, sometimes I can't 100% understand everything, and I haven't, So I just wanted to hear that input from you, and no real questions today, but that was all I wanted to ask.
All right.
So,
well, thank you very much.
Well.
Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The bottom line here is it is not sufficient for the American worker to be just getting by with rent, food, and all the mandated health insurance and the rest of it. If they're not earning enough money to go into the shopping malls and buy products, then the consumer economy grinds to a halt. And with it, the supply chain economy that gets products to the malls, the manufacturers who make those products, and it's not really a way to revive American manufacturing to be doing that. All right, let's get on back here. A lot of people are saying, what's going on with gold? And gold has been down for a while, and the suspicions are it's being deliberately manipulated by blending it with paper gold contracts. They blame the price of the physical with the paper contracts, and they say that's the gold fix right there. But they can overprint that paper, and in fact they have, as a way of diluting the price of gold. So a lot of people are out there saying it may be time for gold to rebound. Over at safehaven.com, they're saying we're seeing the bottom. Okay, we can see the bottom, and it's been 6 straight months of decline, but they're predicting this streak is at an end. Maybe, maybe not. It depends on how desperate the banking system is to keep us on our savings accounts, and how desperate the stock market is to keep us buying their paper equities. However, down at the Perth Mint, gold and silver bullion coin sales soared in September. So they're snatching it on up. I saw a TV commercial for one of these silver traders saying that demand is now exceeding supply. And Barron's is saying it is time to buy gold. Bank of America is predicting gold will soar above 1,300. So it may, if you've got some investment income, if you've got disposable income, it might be the time to build up your portfolio's metal investment here. The last thing you want to do, though, is go on credit to invest anywhere. And unfortunately, I've been hearing that a lot of very desperate Americans are basically gambling. They're borrowing money and they're trying to play the market. And that is a recipe for disaster. That's basically what caused a lot of the harm during the crash of the 1930s here. Peter Schiff is out there saying that the coming financial crisis is going to be much bigger than 2008 and that people will be dumping dollars and buying gold. Gold always has intrinsic value. The value of the dollar fluctuates based on various whims and interests. Oman is planning a new oil pipeline to Iran, trying to basically get ahead of the latest U.S. sanctions, and they finalized the deal in last July. The pipeline is going to cost $1.2 billion, and it will send 28 million cubic meters per day of Iranian natural gas to Oman via Iran's southern port of Mubarak. So they're definitely going with that. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin has come on out defending the Nord Stream 2 project and basically commenting on reports that Washington, D.C. was going to start sanctioning any companies participating on the Nord Stream pipeline. And Putin is out there saying it's time for the EU to defend its interests, because it's definitely in the EU's interest for this pipeline project to go through. And they shouldn't kowtow to the United States, saying, no, we'll still stick with the old pipeline that runs through Ukraine. We're reaching a point where all these sanctions are going to backfire, where the entire world is just going to stand up and say, enough with all of this. You know, you're locking up the global economy. More critics have stepped forward regarding Trump's NAFTA version 2.0, saying it's just another corporate giveaway. Provisions within NAFTA 2.0 will make it harder to hold big oil and gas accountable, while threatening efforts to protect consumers, workers, and the environment. Now, one day after signing the new NAFTA deal, Canada has announced that they're going to set up a massive project to supply liquefied natural gas to Asia. And that would make them a major competitor with the United States of America. And this announcement came less than 36 hours after the Trump administration said it reached a deal with Canada on NAFTA. Now, this is going to raise an interesting situation, because remember a few days ago we had the Secretary of the Interior was getting all huffy about the fact that Russia wanted to send oil and liquefied natural gas into areas where the U.S. was selling those same products, and therefore they were considering a naval blockade on Russia to prevent those Russian oil and gas ships from sailing. So what are they going to do now that Canada is setting up a rival liquefied natural gas delivery system for Asia? Are they going to blockade Canada? Is Canadian bacon about to become real? But over in the EU, they are showing signs of standing up to U.S. bullying over Iran sanctions, and they're basically moving forward with their special purpose vehicle in which they're going to do business with Iran using the euro and completely drop any involvement with the U.S. dollar. So the U.S. dollar is still a major reserve currency in the world, but its position is clearly in decline. And global de-dollarization is going to be a jolt for the U.S. economy, and the U.S. economy is already very, very fragile. In fact, if the world just decided they'd had enough with the United States sanctions and all the warmongering, all they've got to do is just drop the dollar all at the same time. The party would definitely be over at that point. Pardon me. Okay, the EPA wants to relax restrictions on power plants that are pumping mercury into the air. Now remember, mercury is a powerful neurotoxin, and basically what the EPA is saying, they had bad math when they set up the original regulations. Fuzzy math, bad math, that they're recalculating the allowable emission levels, and they're going to be higher than what they are right now. Okay. Story coming out of Global Research up in Canada. If you take out the package insert for pretty much every vaccine that's out there, it will contain the disclaimer, quote, "This vaccine has not been evaluated for its carcinogenic or mutagenic potentials or impairment of fertility," end quote. That phrase, or one just like it, can be found on just about every vaccine package insert, and should be reason for any person to decline vaccination, especially for their children. Apparently, right now, doctors are no longer required to give full informed consent regarding vaccines. And people are encouraged by TV shows to blindly trust their doctors, which is silly. There was that Johns Hopkins study that showed medical mistakes are the third leading cause of death in the United States after cancer and heart disease. So they're just pouring out all these chemicals. They're indemnified from civil litigation, and they openly admit, this could be cancerous. We don't know. We haven't checked. This could make you sterile. We don't know. We haven't checked. And don't forget all those scandals in other countries where vaccines were found to have intentionally added chemicals to sterilize women these shots were being given to. Are they going to start doing that here to the American people? Maybe. Got to make room for all those illegal immigrants and refugees coming on in. Which hasn't stopped the vaccine industry from cranking up the yearly propaganda, get your flu shot or you're going to die. I saw a commercial on Fox over there reminding that people 65 and older, can very easily die from complications of the flu. So get your shot right now. And it's marketing. It's marketing. They're selling a product most people don't need. Most cases of illness claimed to be the flu actually turn out to be ordinary colds. It takes a lab test to determine if somebody actually has influenza versus any of the other more benign illnesses that permeate our environment. And there are natural flu remedies out there as well, along with just good hygiene and keeping your distance from people who are obviously ill. But the medical industrial complex is just as greedy as the military industrial complex. And medical care in this country has been turned into just another racket. And that goes all the way back to President Nixon, who signed the Health Maintenance Organization Act for his friends over at Kaiser Permanente. Prior to that, it was actually illegal in this country to make high profits off of medical care. You were supposed to treat the patient. You were supposed to bill the patient for the time and services of the doctors and the overhead of the hospital and the medical supplies. But it had to basically zero out. There couldn't be a huge plus on the accounting sheet when it was all over. But that all went away with the HMO Act. And medical costs have soared, and the quality of medical care in this country has declined. And the pharmaceutical industries are out there with a new business model. Hey, we don't want to sell medicines to people who are sick. If they die, we can get sued. We're going to sell medicines to people who are perfectly healthy and don't need them. Little bit of news from the world of science. This actually gets back to that story we had yesterday where the Nobel Prize Committee is being encouraged to focus less on the actual scientific achievements of Nobel nominees and work for diversity and geography and topic and basically PC it up. Well, they sort of kind of got their wish today because Canada's Donna Strickland of the University of Waterloo won the Nobel Peace, not the Peace Prize, the Nobel Prize for Physics. And she's only the third woman to do so after Marie Curie and Maria Gopart-Mayer. And apparently Donna and her associates came up with some major improvements to laser technology to make them more effective for things like eye surgery or microengineering. And so she got that one. The Nobel Foundation also came on out and said that while they deplore the actions of Myanmar's civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, that her Peace Prize will not be withdrawn. She gets to keep that little one. Now, I pity those poor people out on Indonesia like they haven't suffered enough. They had a major quake, 7.5, followed by a monster tsunami. They are still cleaning up from that. And now the volcano, Mount Supatan, is erupting on the island of Sulawesi. Probably was kicked into life by that major earthquake. So, again, what they're having to go through down there. Okay, we're coming up here on our final commercial break. We're going to take a break for some commercials, as I just said. And, okay, we'll be right back with the last segment of our program today. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. And getting on back to the Kavanaugh Carnival. Apparently, the Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats are now tweeting up a storm. The Democrats are starting to make all kinds of utterly ridiculous allegations. The Republicans are playing defensive. But again, I think it's going to reveal to the American people just how dysfunctional this government truly has become. Okay, we're going to take one more phone call for the show, and that would be Beth in Virginia. Aloha, Beth. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you? I just have a quick question. I know it's almost the end of the show, but just on the economy, I'm kind of confused. You know, you talk about the economy's tanking, and I just wondered where you get the truth, because when I listen to other talk show hosts, not only RBN, but other that I thought was truth, you know, like Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, Hannity, they're all saying the economy's booming, the GDP is, 0.2, and jobs are coming back. And, you know, how do we get truth? How do I find out?
Basically, what's going on here is there are too many people, even in the independent media, who are taking the official government economic numbers at face value. And you really should not be doing that, which is why we dig into some sources that are a little bit deeper in, articles by people who are on the inside of the economic system. Obviously, the government and corporations want you to think the economy is doing wonderful. I mean, after all, it's the start of the Christmas shopping season, and they want to flog some more money out of you between now and December 25th. But they don't want the American people to know how bad things really are. And so, yeah, you're going to be, look at the unemployment numbers, for example, where they're saying, you know, the jobs are coming back. And the jobs report last month, they said we created 200,000 jobs. The part that was left out of the corporate media report was that over 400,000 jobs were lost. And so probably a good place to look for the real jobs numbers is the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And like any other government website, it can be very difficult to navigate and find the information that you want. But when you look at the workforce participation rate at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it doesn't line up with this unemployment number of 3 to 4%. And the reason is they're basically cooking the books. We have almost 100 million Americans who have not been able to find jobs in a very, very long time, but they are moved to a different category. And that unemployment number that comes out of the government and through the corporate media basically represents people who only lost their jobs in the last couple of weeks and are still on some form of unemployment assistance. And it's just a way of disguising how bad things are in this country, because I think this government is really concerned that there could be an uprising of the American people if they really came to understand how bad things are going to be. I don't want to see that myself, but I still think people are deserving of the truth.
yeah, it's very hard to find the truth. I mean, you know,
you got to work at it. You got to work at it. If somebody's out there, you know, just giving you news for free, like the corporate media, what they're feeding you is what somebody else wants you to think.
Right. Oh, I don't even watch that anymore. Sometimes I just look at a little bit just to see what they're saying, and you can tell by the headlines they're just lying to you. I understand that, but to get the economic numbers, that's what I was trying to figure out. When everybody says things are going good, you know, how do you find out the things that aren't going good? You know,
it's very obfuscated. It's very obfuscated. Anyway, listen, Beth, got to let you go. We're at the end of the show. Thank you very much for the phone call. Hang on. There's the music. I was a little late coming in there. So we're going to get on out of here. Claire and I have got some things we have to do this afternoon. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with other people that you know. Use email, face-to-face contact. Social media right now is a total waste of time unless you're into funny cat videos. So please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back here tomorrow. Aloha, America.